With all that said, let's begin with our first guest, Hari Kirtana Das. Hari Kirtana Das is a bhakti yogi, author, and teacher who guides people on journeys of self-discovery and personal transformation. A lifelong student of theistic yoga philosophy, Hari Kirtana has lived in yoga ashrams and intentional communities, worked for Fortune 500 companies and Silicon Valley startups, and brings a wide range of scriptural knowledge and life experience to his classes, workshops, and courses. He's a frequent contributor to forums and magazines about the enduring relevance of yoga's ancient wisdom to life in the modern world. You can learn more about Hari by visiting his website, harikirtana.com. I was able to participate in his brilliant 3-part online class with commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, ancient text and modern application. He offers a free Zoom discussion each month, which I have had the pleasure to participate in. I'm also excited about his forthcoming book about the Bhagavad Gita due out this spring. Please join us in prayer with our first speaker. Welcome, Hari. Thanks for joining in from DC. And thank you also for getting this discussion started off with a prayer.
Jill, thank you very, very much for inviting me to participate in this seminar or symposium. It's an honor to be here and a pleasure to be sharing this platform with my fellow panelists. I'll begin with a prayer from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which I think is very timely. I'll chant the Sanskrit and then share the translation with you. This prayer goes like this. Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya Swastyastu Vishvasya Kala Prasidatam Jayantu Bhutani Shivam Mito Dhiya Manascha Bhadram Bhajata Dadhukshaje Aveshyatam no Matir Apyahaituki. May there be good fortune throughout the universe, and may all who are envious be pacified. May all living beings find peace through the practice of bhakti yoga, for by accepting devotional service, they will think of each other's welfare. Therefore, let our minds always remain absorbed in meditation on the transcendental personality of Godhead, and let us always serve the Supreme Lord without any ulterior motive. So I'll explain a little bit about my particular form of faith, bhakti yoga, through a little bit of commentary on this prayer. Bhakti yoga means union with the transcendental supreme being through devotional service. Bhakti is often translated as devotion, which implies a feeling, a sentiment. The sages in my particular lineage, called Chaitanya Vaishnavism, worship of Vishnu or Krishna, devotion to Krishna as explained and understood by the great sage Chaitanya, who appeared at the end of the 15th century and taught into the beginning of the 16th. Translates bhakti as something active, devotional service, not just the feeling of devotion, but love expressed through action. And in this prayer, the speaker, named Prahlad Maharaj, one of the great devotees of Vishnu, who is understood to be expert in the theory and practice of devotional yoga, recommends that devotional service to the one supreme source of everything is a means by which we can come to think of each other's welfare. The reason for this is because the conception of the absolute truth in this way of thinking is that of a complete whole, an infinite and complete whole, of which we are all infinitesimal parts. And when we see one another as infinitesimal parts of the same complete whole, there is a sense of spiritual kinship, not just with all human beings, but with all beings. And therefore, that sense of unity through the central element that connects us all provides impetus for compassion, for empathy, for wishing well to all living beings. This is also a prescription for personal peace, for our own individual peace. And this prayer is particularly directed to a form of Vishnu called Narasingha. So the very first part of the prayer, Om Namo Bhagavate Narasinghaya, unto Narasinghaya, unto Narasingha. So Singha means lion, Nara means man. So this is an avatar, meaning one who descends. In colloquial terms, an incarnation of Vishnu, who appears as a half man, half lion, and appears specifically for the sake of protecting his devotees. And there is, of course, the element of external protection, protection from outside forces or influences, but there's also the element of inner protection. That is to say, protection from my own propensity for selfishness, for pride, for gratuitous sensuality beyond that which is healthy, especially healthy for the pursuit of spiritual life. So requesting this particular incarnation of Vishnu to reside within my own heart and be the object of my meditation, be the destroyer of all of my own inner obstacles to spiritual advancement, is part of actually the daily practice of Krishna Bhakti in the Chaitanya Vaishnava tradition. So what I'd like to do is share a little bit of how I personally came to this spiritual tradition, how I developed my understanding of what this tradition involves, what its goals are, what my spiritual practice consists of, how I came to that, and then a little bit of background on the theistic philosophy that we find in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, also known as the Bhagavad Purana, which is the book in which we find the prayer that I just recited for you. If at any time you have a question or a comment, something you'd like to share, please go ahead and enter that into the Q&A window, and I will stop periodically just to see what, if anything, we have there. I'd be happy to respond to your questions. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for final questions to wrap things up. So my name, Hari Kirtan Das, is a Sanskrit name that was given to me in 1978 when I took formal initiation into the tradition of Chaitanya Vaishnavism. It was given to me in a formal ceremony by my Diksha guru, and it means the servant of the chanting of the names of Hari, and the name Hari indicates one who removes obstacles on the path of devotional yoga. So it translates into something very long. In English, Sanskrit is a very compressed language. Fortunately, I do not have to sign my name in English on checks anymore because we have, electronic ways of doing these things. Saved me a lot of ink. I began reading the Bhagavad Gita when I was in high school, and I did not understand it. But I felt an attraction to it, so I tried reading it a few more times. And the third time, well, actually, first time I just didn't understand it at all. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. The second time I read it, I got the idea that it was about religion, and I was looking for yoga. And so, I let it go. But I still felt an attraction. And the third time I read the Bhagavad Gita, I did so as part of a group study while living in a devotional yoga ashram in New York City. And studying with a group and hearing from experienced teachers, and also because I was living in an intentional spiritual community, trying to live the teachings I was studying, that made all the difference. And I felt like I had a much better grasp on the idea that yoga and religion were not contradictory. In fact, that the words, in a way, were synonyms. If we look at the Latin root of the word religion, religio, again, to connect. And one of the meanings of yoga is connection, based on the Sanskrit root yuj, as in yoke, to be connected through a dynamic element of connection. So I came to understand bhakti yoga as the science of creating an existential condition within myself that was conducive to religious experience, not so much a religion as we understand individual religions, individual faith forms, but rather a science that existed in a universal sense, in a sense of being independent from any particular form of faith. And what attracted me to the idea was the soundness and completeness of a theological philosophy. At first, when I first read the Bhagavad Gita, I rejected the teachings on the basis that it seemed to be promoting a personal conception of a supreme being. And I was correct, it was. But I was attracted to it because it confirmed something that I had thought on my own when I was even younger. The idea that I myself and all other people were forms of energy, and that the law of conservation of energy tells us that energy cannot be created or destroyed. Therefore, I reasoned that I must be invincible in some form or fashion, that there was some element of myself, my consciousness, that never came into being and could not possibly go out of being, even though I was currently in this container, this material body. And the first instructive verse of the Bhagavad Gita confirms individual existence on a spiritual level, which is to say an eternal level. That verse is in the second chapter, the 12th verse. Never was there Krishna speaking to Arjuna, his friend and a warrior on a battlefield, faced with the prospect of having to fight a battle he really doesn't want to fight. Turns to Krishna and asks for advice. What course of action will serve the greatest good under the circumstances? And Krishna gives Arjuna a baseline teaching upon which the rest of the Bhagavad Gita is based. And that baseline teaching is, never was there a time when I, Krishna, did not exist, nor you, Arjuna, did not exist, nor all these kings assembled on the battlefield, in other words, everybody else in the world, did not exist, nor in the future is there any possibility that any of us will cease to be. So this is a validation of our experience of individual existence. And the rest of the Gita goes on to give what I felt was a pretty coherent explanation for how we experience ourselves and how we experience the world. The part I had trouble with was the idea that Krishna occupied the position of God. In the first reading, I felt, I'm being asked to believe that a little blue flute playing cowherd boy is the supreme being, and that seemed a little far-fetched. It sounded to me like it was kind of in the same knowledge category as the universe was created by a school of cosmic dolphins or something. However, in due course of time, by virtue of group study of the sacred texts in the wisdom tradition of Bhakti Yoga, in this particular lineage, I came to the conclusion that there was a very coherent philosophy that made sense of this ultimate conclusion about Krishna being the personality of Godhead, meaning the personality of that from which the qualities of Godness arise. I referenced soundness and completeness before. So soundness means no internal contradictions. The philosophy does not chase its tail in any way or have any unresolvable problems or come up with something that is inexpressible. And then completeness means can be practically applied in all relevant circumstances. There was also the element of practice confirming theory. In other words, it was scientific. It was not just a matter of faith, but there was an experiment that you could do to test the theory, and that was sadhana, spiritual practice. So I adopted the spiritual practice, and by my own personal experience, doing this kind of subjective experiment, I found that the theory seemed to hold. So that's how I came to this particular path of spirituality. The path itself is articulated by the disciples of Sri Chaitanya, who I mentioned earlier appears at the end of the 15th through the very beginning of the 16th century. So this is a medieval theology developed on the basis of much older wisdom texts, the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavat Purana, is something we understand to be a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, also known as the Brahma Sutra. The Vedanta Sutra is a set of codified instructions through which one understands the philosophical conclusions of the Upanishads, and the Upanishads are the philosophical portion of the Vedas. So we work our way all the way back to the Vedas and the philosophical portions of the Vedas known as the Upanishads. So these are all commentaries and elaborations or interpretations of Upanishadic teaching. So very ancient stuff that is systematized and formalized in its literature from around the 16th century forward. And it's something that's not frozen. It's not, we often hear yoga is a 5,000-year-old practice or philosophy, but it is not something that's been fossilized. It's not something that's static. My practice feels like participation in a dynamic, evolving tradition. One of the interesting things about the Srimad Bhagavatam in particular is that the Bhagavatam makes a distinction between the concept of the absolute truth and the concept of God. And this was something that I found to be particularly attractive because the concept of God that I grew up with as a Western-born person in a predominantly Christian society, I was raised Jewish, and therefore I was familiar with the Abrahamic traditions and the concept of a creator God that went with that. And I decided relatively young that I was going to look elsewhere for my own spiritual path. And I came upon this teaching in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which introduces the idea that God as creator is a position. And there's a person who is uniquely qualified to occupy this position. We hear about this also in the Yoga Sutras, where Patanjali refers to Ishvara as Purusha Vishesha, a person, but a special person, unique, categorically different kind of person, not like us. And therefore, because the absolute truth is described in one of the Upanishads, the Isha Upanishad, as being complete, the attribute of personness is also present in this absolute truth. And this makes sense insofar as our own personness is derived from the source of our being. The Vedanta Sutra begins with the aphorism, Atato Brahma Jigyasa Janna Yasya Yataha. Now, as all sutras begin with now, try to understand Brahman. And Brahman is defined as that from which all things proceed. Therefore, logically, the attribute of personness must be present in Brahman in order for us to have the experience of personness, because everything originates in Brahman. This also includes language. And it is by hearing that we begin this reconnection, religio, with the personal aspect of the absolute truth. There are four principal practices of bhakti yoga in my tradition, hearing being the first. So we hear from sources of wisdom. Then the second is chanting or glorification. In all traditions, in all theistic traditions, we hear that the name of God is holy. What makes this name holy? The non-difference of the name from the person who is being named. In other words, the sound vibration of the Supreme Being is understood in Bhakti Yoga to be non-different from the person. Therefore, to chant the names of the Supreme Being is to associate directly with the Supreme Being, and the purifying effect of that association elevates the consciousness and cleanses the heart of all of the dust that has accumulated on the mirror of the mind, so as to obscure our view of ourselves as we truly are in our eternal spiritual condition. Then, after chanting, remembering, looking at the world through the lens of scriptural wisdom in order to see the divine nature of the world and the source of the world, the divine source of the world within the world. So another element of this completeness is the idea that the Supreme Person, taking the position of creator, is the source of the world, but is also within the world and is non-different from the world. There is a simultaneous oneness and difference between the Supreme Being and the Supreme Being's energies, of which this entire cosmic manifestation is an emanation. The energies are divided into material and spiritual. That is to say, Bhakti Yoga in the Chaitanya Vaishnava tradition incorporates elements of Sankhya, which means enumeration of elements, particularly the enumeration of material elements and the distinction between matter and spirit. And Vedanta. Veda means knowledge, Anta means end, so Vedanta means the ultimate conclusion of knowledge, which is knowledge of Brahman or transcendence. And that transcendence is understood to have three features, called Brahman, the undifferentiated oneness of being, the spiritual substrata of reality. Param Atma, so Atma, the individual soul, consciousness. Param, paramount, supreme. So universal consciousness, that consciousness which is localized within the heart of all beings and within each subatomic particle of matter and is universal. The explanation for how one subatomic particle at one end of the universe knows what another subatomic particle at the other end of the universe is doing in real time. Astrophysicists take note. And then finally, Bhagavan, meaning the personal form of the absolute truth. And the energies of this absolute truth, divided into matter and spirit, we find delineated as earth, water, fire, air, ether, in modern parlance, solids, liquids, gases, earth, solids, water, liquids, fire, radiance, then gases, and then space. And then also mind, intelligence, and ego, as well as the life force, prana. These are all in the category of matter. And then beyond that is what is regarded as a superior energy, and this is described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the living beings, you and I, who engage with this, with these material elements. And then beyond that, the source of both of these divisions of energy, the Supreme Being. So seeing the divine nature of the world and the source of the world within the world is part of remembering. And then serving is the 4th practice of Bhakti Yoga, actively engaging in becoming an instrument of divine will, inquiring as to how one can be of service to the highest truth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, that highest truth is defined as reality distinguished from illusion for the benefit of all. So my role in being of service to the highest truth, as I understand it, is to be a teacher. I am a mentor to individuals as we walk together on the path of spiritual understanding. And as Jill mentioned at the top of the introduction that she so kindly gave me, I offer community conversations and courses and such like that in order to share my understanding and realization of the teachings that I have been so fortunate to receive. I think that is a sufficient general explanation of what my spiritual path consists of and how I came to it. And if we have some questions in the Q&A, or if there's something in the chat, Jill, if you'd be kind enough to let me know what we have, and I will be happy to reply.
So there is something that came up in the chat. Can you see that, Hari?
Oh, yes. Okay. I see a couple of things. It sounds that you have found the wisdom text unfolds and reveals itself the more it is read, studied, meditated on, and great worth is found in studying and practicing in a community. Yes, I have found that I can read and reread the Bhagavad Gita over and over again, and every time there is something new there. There is something that speaks to me in my particular circumstance, wherever I'm at in my life at that particular moment. It has endless depth. The same can be said for the Srimad Bhagavatam, and even more so. It is a much bigger text. With its commentaries, it is the size of an encyclopedia and constitutes a project of lifelong study, to be sure. And I find particularly studying with a teacher and in a group where there can be conversation, where there can be dialogue about the meaning of the text and its practical application. That is a very, very powerful way to study it, really, in any spiritual tradition, not just in mine. The conversations that we can have in satsang, in groups of people whose interest is in discovering and exploring the truth with a capital T, have immeasurable value. And the cross-generational conversation that we have, where tradition is explored and where needed, renovated in order to retain the essence, but adjust the variable details in order for the tradition to remain relevant and applicable. That's one of the things I meant by feeling like I'm part of a dynamic, living spiritual tradition. So yeah, I do believe that's true. Second comment, I find this fascinating, particularly references to the lion. Just curious on your thoughts on any similarities or parallels or not between Krishna and Christ. Christ is also referenced as a lion in the book of Revelation. Additionally, there is a Buddhist prophecy of a future Buddha to come who is also associated with the lion, or the symbol of the lion. Just curious. I am not enough of a general theologian to be able to get into the specifics of the particular comparison to Christ as lion or Buddhist prophecies with that kind of symbolism. What I can say is that in my own personal spiritual journey, I read at least some of the New Testament, and I also did not understand that. I had a lot of trouble wrapping my head around it. After I had engaged in a group study of the Bhagavad Gita and felt like I had at least a beginner's solid understanding of devotional yoga, I went back and looked at the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, ignored a lot of the stories around those teachings, but just focused on his teachings, and came to the conclusion that what he was teaching was the same thing, that this was bhakti yoga, the same elements of renunciation of material life and the pursuit of happiness in the material world were all there. The emphasis on surrender to a supreme deity, that was there. All of it really was there. And I came to the conclusion that Jesus of Nazareth was a devotional yogi. Whereas Jesus was an emissary of his Father and expressed unity with God the Father. Krishna positions himself as the Father, as the original source of all creation. My Parama Guru, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, my grand guru, the guru of my guru, and the principal teacher from whom my understanding of Chaitanya Vaishnavism or Krishna Bhakti comes, regarded Jesus as his guru, as an example of a pure devotee of God, someone who is willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of being an instrument of divine will, which is to say, to be on a mission to reunite people with God and show people the path through which they can once again experience a relationship of love between themselves and the source of their being. So that's what I can offer you with regard to the relationship or the comparison between Krishna and Jesus Christ.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hari. I enjoyed your presentation today. Something that stood out to me is this idea that one can chant the holy name and that it purifies us. I think that's fascinating, especially given there are so many names, right, for the Creator. So
yes, and the Bhakti Yoga tradition of which in which I'm participating recognizes that there are innumerable names. In fact, there's an 8-part instructional prayer that's also recited in the morning, and that I utilize in my own practice prior to my mantra meditation practice, which I'll describe for just a moment. That prayer, that portion of the prayer goes, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda, so many. So it's understood that the benefit of chanting Krishna's names or the names of the Supreme are there in so many different forms. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also says, however one approaches me, I reciprocate with them in exactly that way. Everyone follows my path in all respects. So this idea of approachability from unlimited directions is there. Now, the direction I'm approaching from, the practice, the names that I found were the ones that resonated with me, which made Krishna my Ishta Devata, my form of God that I most relate to. The set of names in the mantra that I practice are Hare, Krishna, and Rama, set in a very symmetrical pattern of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And in the mornings, I have beads, japa beads, and I chant that mantra on each one of these beads and then proceed to the next bead and chant again until I get all the way around to the other end, and then I turn around and go back the other way. So that's the essential individual practice of mantra meditation in the Bhakti Yoga tradition that I'm participating in. And then there's also a group mantra meditation practice, Kirtan, my name, Hari Kirtan, Das, servant of the chanting, implies congregational chanting, communal chanting, a call and response chanting of the mantra set to music. And this is the way that in combination, japa purifies the heart and communal chanting, kirtan, purifies our relationships.
Beautiful. Thank you. I really appreciate you coming today. I know you have to hop off for this wedding, but I appreciate you coming and sharing with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate, and I'm looking forward to accessing the replays later in order to hear what my fellow panelists have to say. I'm always anxious to hear about how people find their spiritual paths and what those paths comprise. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you.